I'm Wesley Gamer01 on YouTube. I'm Wesley5714 on Twitch, and welcome to Late Gaming News, the only news channel that is intentionally behind the times. We don't believe in striking while the iron is hot because final bosses expect that. Tonight's story is actually about Nintendo. Nintendo is recently attacking video game emulation. As stated earlier, Nintendo is actually attacking those who provide emulators for video games, more precisely the ROMs, the programs, the games, those sorts of things. Emulation is technically illegal, okay, unless it's being licensed by the people who hold the copyrights to the materials. Now, this is actually pissing off many gamers for the reason being that it seems kind of hypocritical to most because Nintendo released a product at 2016 and 2017, and they re-released one of those products. I wonder what that product was. Oh, NES Mini Classic? Ring a bell? Yes, the NES Mini Classic is actually a product that uses emulation, and just last year they released the SNES Mini Classic, which is another emulator, one that actually emulates for the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and the other one that actually emulates for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Two separate video game consoles, and one had 30 games on it and the other had 21, if you unlocked one through about 5 minutes of gameplay. But here's where it gets hypocritical, is that we're talking about games that are 20, 30 years old, roughly. Games that are hard to come by, either because there's licensing issues or because there's issues with availability, and some of gamers just use it as a means to protect video games from essentially fading into history. It's a way of saving video games for the fucking future. To be completely honest, it's a dick move by Nintendo. If you look, people have actually stripped apart the NES Classic and the SNES Classic and actually realize that the SNES Classic and the NES Mini Classic, they're both essentially the same kind of emulators that they would buy online. The only difference is that Nintendo essentially put their own hardware on it for their own hardware of their controllers and their own software with their own ROMs and put their own little sticker of seal of approval. The only caveat I see that I could possibly understand this would have to be under essentially protecting their copyright. Now, if you don't protect your copyright within the United States, you lose your copyright. I do not know if Japan has similar laws to that or not. I am not going to proclaim to know one way or the other, but that is the case within the United States. And then there's also to consider the fact that they have international copyrights to protect against. Now, they essentially sold emulators to the general public, completely legal because they have all of the copyrights and trademarks to the video games to which they sold. And essentially you're selling everything at a marked up value, and it's the same kind of hardware that most gamers can actually get on their own volition. Now, here's where I have a problem. I have a problem with it because Nintendo is not going to release all of their games for the Super Nintendo or the regular Nintendo, the original, the 1980s one. They're not going to release them. They're not going to sell them because there's a whole bunch of licensing issues within the old ROMs themselves, so that they can't or won't sell them. They can't or won't do anything about them. And the real hypocritical thing comes when you consider the Mother series. The Mother series, known in the United States as Earthbound, was essentially not sold within the United States with the exception of Mother 2, which was rebranded as Earthbound itself. Now, there's an emulation community within Earthbound itself that essentially has gone on a tangent about wanting to get these games. They have emulated, they've translated, they've retranslated, they've sold some physical copies of the original Mother game on an NES cartridge, and it's amazing stuff. But if Nintendo is actually serious about attacking emulators, they have to go after them too. So the whole mother community, whether they like it or not, will have to stand up for emulators. People that actually preserve video games for historical reasons will have to defend emulators. It is fucking stupid for Nintendo to do this because they're attacking their own fan base. From a legal perspective, which is the only one I can fucking see this from, it's understandable for the copyright issues. But unless they're having anyone openly challenge them for their copyright issues, which I've never seen, this is a dick move. They've sold them. They're essentially giving everyone one simple, clear message with this. Our emulators are the only emulators we want you to play. We don't want you to play anyone else's emulators. Because reasons. And if they're not willing to go after the mother emulation as well, then they're showing a certain level of hypocrisy. And they're already showing a certain level of hypocrisy within selling emulators, selling something that you can put emulators on, because it's still on for sale currently until the end of December. I can't defend this. It is fucking stupid. I'd say they have their head up their asses, but I'm pretty sure that they couldn't tell their ass from a hole in the ground as far as I'm concerned. This is just going to piss off the community. It's going to piss off the mother community. It's going to piss off retro gaming communities, which it already has. And it's going to piss off everyday gamers that actually just want to play old games, not necessarily the retro people. You know, they're Twitch streamers that actually stream old video games. I'm thinking of fucking speedrunners. They have to be losing their shit about this. They can't be sitting and taking this down lightly. And yes, there are people that are like purists that will only play video games off of their old original cartridge or their own original disc or their own original download and say, well, emulation isn't exactly like the original. So, I'm nearsighted and colorblind. I can't tell the difference between an emulated Super Mario game and one that's played in the cartridge. You know, the purist argument is not going to work with me, and it's not going to work with the average consumer. They simply just want to play games. Now, I will take Nintendo's side. I will take their side conditionally. Okay? I will take Nintendo's side if they get rid of their subscription plans for the Nintendo Switch, if they start releasing all their old games for free or for a marked down value, and make all of their old games for all of their old systems available to the general public. Now, that's a tall order. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. But here's the thing. That's how you make it available. That's how you beat emulation. You make yourselves more available than emulation. You know, I mean, if someone wants to put Turtles in Time on their Super Nintendo entertainment system for their mini classic, I'm not going to be one to say, oh, you can't do that. You know, I'm fairly certain that Nintendo could not get the rights to do that. Or say that someone wants to play Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Well, Nintendo's going to have to pay a fee to Mike Tyson for that. And that hasn't happened since, 1980s, 1990s? It's a complete clusterfuck. And they're not going to make anything publicly available because, you know, Nintendo specializes in fucking people over as of late. I'm not going to pretend that this is the greatest thing that's happened. It's not. It's terrible. But if Nintendo's serious about going after emulators, they're not going to be able to be picky and choosy about this, because if they go the way that they're currently going about people that actually are emulating games that they also have for sale, which I personally have issues with, but, you know, that's just me. I think emulation is okay under a few circumstances. The first one is the game publicly available? If not, fine, emulate the fucking thing. I don't care. Is a game outrageously priced? Like, are they charging $60 for 30 games that are essentially 20 plus years old? Yeah, I got a problem with that. Nintendo does have a pricing problem with their emulators, be they on a plug and play or on a downloadable console or whatever. So they have a problem with pricing, they have a problem with availability, and then they have a problem with having to stick up their ass saying, oh, you can only get it from us. At last one, they have some legal say. I'm not going to pretend that they don't. They do have the legal rights. But I'm going to say what I actually said about Atlas Gaming, is that you have the legal right to do it, but it makes you a dick, you know? And everybody has been saying that when Atlas made their little bullshit threat against Twitch streamers. I believe it was Rooster Teeth that first said it. I want to give credit where credit was due. But having said that, it's a very correct thought that just because something's legal doesn't mean that we're not going to call you a dick for it. Now, what I would never suggest that anyone do emulators because they are technically illegal, with the exception of people buying plug and plays. Those are legal so long as they're licensed by the original copyright holder and trademark holder. Having said that, it's Nintendo. Just Nintendo. Oh, while we're on the subject of Nintendo, this is a copy of Metroid 2. I got this on eBay. This Nintendo didn't receive any funds for, and I got it used, and it was marketed as used. It's for Metroid 2. Here's the thing, Nintendo. Illegal emulation isn't the only way we retro gamers can get retro games without paying you. There is a used market. Now, if we can't get our games through emulators and we can't get our games through you, at least not reasonably priced, we will go to other fucking places. Believe me. We will upkeep old consoles. We will upkeep old games. We will upkeep old controllers. We will game the fuck on, my friend.